And welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. You've seen the video I've already done where I ate the iron rations from the Dungeons & Dragons setting. There's a few elements in that meal that we actually wanted to show how we made it. Today we're doing the Pemmican. Now, the Pemmican I wasn't even going to do, but I think I talked about it in the D&D Iron Rations video. That was actually very central to what the term Iron Rations came from. So I couldn't really let it slip. And I did a little bit of research before what we're about to make. And there's a very strong connection to Canada. So I thought, yes, we've got to include pemmican in the Iron Rations, even though they're not medieval European historical accuracy, but neither is Dungeons and Dragons anyway. So yes, let's do pemmican because that has a strong Canadian connection. That's actually why I'm wearing my Alert Bay t-shirt, as a matter of fact. I lived there when I was 5 or 6 years old. We stayed there for several years, and that's in sort of the coastal area of British Columbia. Very strong native community there. I grew up going to potlatches and seeing, all kinds of fancy or headdresses and masks and stuff. So I have a sort of a fondness in my memory for native people. And pemmican is actually something that in the prairies is very well known, connected to the Métis, who were the children of French voyagers and also native Canadian and North American people, indigenous people. The Métis, what they would do is they would actually create pemmican, which is a combination of bison meat and suet. And it's mixed up. We're going to be doing that now. I'll show you, but I'll give you a quick rundown. Due to the popularity of how well this stuff lasted as a foodstuff that you could keep in storage for years and years and years, it actually spurred on the Great Pemmican Wars that happened in the 18th century. And at that time, there were two major companies in Canada, the Hudson's Bay Company, which everybody knows, and another company called the Northwest Company. Due to how these wars carried on for so long, the British government of the time had decided, we're going to consolidate both of you companies into the Hudson's Bay Company to stop all of this fighting that's going on. And it was largely over pemmican. There is a really excellent series of YouTube videos that I've subscribed to called James Townsend and Son. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the one that he did, or actually he did 4 episodes about pemmican and the making of it and much more history about it. It's fascinating stuff, and his channel in general is just great for reenactment food and foodstuffs and preparation. But anyway, we're following the recipe that he laid down, where we're taking some bison meat and some suet, and we're going to make pemmican. So, we'll show you how it's done. Right, we got our bison meat. This wasn't easy to find, but to do authentic pemmican, you would really want to have either bison or venison. You could do it with beef, but we managed to get bison. There's a store here in Vancouver, Windsor Quality Meats. When I phoned them today, they just happened to have a big piece of bison that they were cutting up, so we got a pound of that. And in addition to that, we got a Tora suet. The British store where I got the Guinness chips and also the Iron Brew, they sell suet. This is fantastic. So that essentially we will melt in a pot momentarily, but let's open up the bison meat, because this is the one we're going to have to cut. Now we need to slice this very thin against the grain. There we go. Look at that big hunk of bison. Okay, so very careful with the knife here. We're going to cut it very thinly against the grain. And basically what we're making is essentially beef jerky. We're going to be, after this step, putting this in the oven and drying it out. and it's essentially just going to make what looks like bacon strips almost. Apparently what the Métis would have done is actually hang these on wooden racks and let it either dry in the sun or put it in front of a fire to dry it out. We're going to cheat. We're going to do the oven. Alright, we're getting close to the end here. And it's getting harder to slice thinly, but I'll see what I can do. And the last slice. There we go. So we have a variety of slices of different shapes and sizes, but they're all pretty thin. And I'm just imagining from the footage I've seen before, beef jerky type slices here. Now, wash your hands, people. So what we're going to do now, we've got our rack here, and we're just basically setting out all these pieces that we've just cut across here because we're going to be drying them out. And now what we're going to do is put our thinly sliced bison into the oven. And set it on the lowest possible level we can. 170 degrees. And we'll come back in 10 to 12 hours. It's in an oven. The instructions we have is lowest possible temperature, 10 to 12 hours. So we'll check back in 10, see what it's like, come back in 12. You'll know when it's done. Apparently it'll be brittle and you can break it in your hands. Well, it's been 16 hours now. We checked at the 10-hour mark and the 12-hour mark. Some of the bigger pieces were still a bit soft, but I think we're close now. As you can see, if I pull out one of these, it's looking kind of burned, but I think that's just because the bison is a fairly dark meat. Some of these pieces do flake off, and they actually snap. That's what you want. Some of these larger pieces are just a little bit of moisture left in them. So what we're going to do is let these cool, and some of the larger pieces just give them a couple more minutes. But I believe a healthy 12 hours, if not longer, is what's required. Alright, well, it's been 16 hours as I mentioned, and now we have our dried bison. You can see it flakes, it breaks apart with the hands. That 1 full pound of bison has turned into roughly 5 or 6 ounces. Basically like half the pound it used to be. But now what we're going to do is break it up into pieces into our mortar and pestle and just start bashing the living heck out of this just to create a powder. So that's our next step here. We get as many little bits in. Yeah, I'm not too concerned about the fact that it looks very black. I mean, it's almost like it's burned or something, but this is bison meat. I mean, the other videos I've seen, they typically are doing beef, and that's a little bit browner, but this has turned out to be very, very black. However, inside there, it looks like it's, you know, pretty decent meat, so I think we'll be alright. We're not going to worry too much about the color. Alright, so now in our mortar and pestle, we're going to start doing some bashing. Well, we're coming along here a little bit, and it's going to be a slow process. I've seen some footage on YouTube showing a fella just going like crazy with a huge amount of bison meat or some kind of meat that he was turning into pemmican. And yeah, it just takes a while. You just gotta give it the old elbow grease. is the last of the pulverized bison. I'll throw it in there with all the rest of it now. So basically what you want to end up with is a powdery type material. Now I've measured all of this. It's just over 5 ounces, 5 1/8. So James Townsend and Son mentioned when they made it, you want to have an equal amount by weight of the suet. So now we're going to measure out 5 1/8 of an ounce of the Atora shredded suet. Ooh, weird. Alright, 5 1/8 of an ounce. Oh, weird, it's like rubbery rice. Oh, and exactly 5 1/8. Cool, we're ready. So our pan is starting to heat up. Let's start melting some suet. Stuff is weird looking. You can see around the edges, it's actually starting to melt a little bit already. So suet, from what I've heard, is the more solid form, I think, and then the melted version is tallow. And I remember hearing the term tallow mixed in with Iron Rations discussion. So clearly this this suet fat rendering material that we're starting to melt down here, mixed in with the meat, is the very stuff, the pemmican, the stuff that Iron Rations is made of. Let's give it a stir. You can see it's almost like butter now. Alright, pretty much all of it is melted down now. So we essentially have a gravy kind of material here. And now we'll add in the bison. And give it a good solid stir. Alright, and then I'm basically just going to pour it into our vessel. Now, I think in native communities and probably the implied medieval equivalent, they would have used animal skin for this purpose. We just got parchment paper. And there is our pemmican.